We're going to go ahead and get started. We're mostly not going to be on slides because this will be a more conversational type of event, more of a panel type of event. But you know, as you join, I know we're seeing more people come in. Please do let us know, you know, where you're joining us from and what your JET years and prefecture were. Before we get started, I would just like to tell you a little bit about USJETAA. I think I see a lot of familiar names, so most of you maybe know, but we are a national nonprofit, and our goal is to further U.S.-Japan relations by supporting this great network of JET alumni, of which there's more than 35,000 in the U.S. now. It's a big number. We are U.S. focused, but we do welcome any JET alumni to join us and become a member. If any of you who are joining are not yet a member, please go to usjetaa.org and become a member so that you can get access to a lot of cool stuff and a directory where you can find friends and make new connections. And if you are a current JET, you should be able to still register, even if you have not quite finished your JET term yet. Without further ado, I would like to begin the webinar. Today's webinar, which is the last one of 2021, is Making Your Own Luck After JET, and our speakers are Kristy Ishii, Mya Fisher, and Steven Horowitz, and they will be speaking in that order. When you register for this webinar, you should have already seen their bios, and they're going to be talking a lot about their own personal journeys. So I'm not going to introduce them in detail. I will let them do that themselves. Now, all righty, so thank you so much. We got 30 people on so far. That's wonderful. If you just joined, please let us know where you're joining from. But now I would like to turn things over to Kristy and have her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her story.
Awesome. Thanks, Bahia. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Like she said, my name is Kristy Ishii, and I'm originally from the small town called Salinas in California, if you've ever been over this area near Monterey. A lot of past JETs, I think, went to Miss and studied Japanese there to be interpreters, translators. I'm from around here. I was in Gunma for JET between 2016 and 2018 in a small city called Tatebayashi. And I stayed in Japan for 2 years before repatriating this June. So post-JET, I was in Tokyo, and I came back June 1st amongst a lot of changing things in the US. So it was like a vastly different country that I felt like I returned to. And in a way, you know, people always told me, you're going to feel a lot of culture shock, you know, when you return to the US. And it turned out to be quite the opposite effect because of Corona. Everyone had masks on, no one was hugging, no one was doing this small chit chat. So I returned, like I felt like, to a Japanified United States. And so it was a very interesting transition back to the US this year. I want to touch on two things. So one, how I utilize the JETAA network, and also just share a little bit of how I got to where I am today, which, as it says here, is a career and transition coach for the U.S. Japan, at least for now, for that network. In 2015, I joined the JET alumni of Southern California. They have a lot of great programs. Before I even went on JET, I joined, and I got a lot of great advice for writing my SOP, a lot of advice for the interviews, and all the way up until I went to Japan. All the alumni were really supportive, and it was a really awesome thing to see folks throughout the community from JET, going to JET, and just, I don't know, just seeing that whole community exist, especially with places like the JCC, Japanese Chamber of Commerce, and Japan America Society. And so there was a lot of support there even before I did the JET program. I don't know if anyone else had that experience, but that was kind of my experience getting introduced to the JETAA. And then I was also able to spend time in Washington, D.C., where I connected with Paige Cottenham-Streeter. You might have heard of her before, and Laurel Lucas Zaweski. I can't say her last name, but I was in the Colcon office, the U.S. Japan Bridging Foundation, and there's one other organization that they all sit in the same office in DC. And I actually met Mya Fisher during my time in DC in 2015, when she was part of U.S. Japan Council, and she gave me some great advice too before I went on the JET program. So as you can see, like JETs are everywhere, and like, I don't know, I just was always in that space because I think anything U.S. Japan related, you're gonna find a JET somewhere in the room. And then another thing that happened was when I finished my term on JETs, I was introduced to Steven's JETwit website, which all of you probably already know, but it's still the most dense and the most accurate, I guess you could say, like recruiting plus advertising for everything US Japan. And I actually found my recruiting job in Tokyo through Gaijinpot, which was one of the links posted on JETwit. So all things to say that being part of like the JETAA community and knowing folks, you know, within, it's truly like an expansive group and deeply rooted in everything US Japan. So I can't thank the USJETAA folks enough. So thank you, Bahia, for all the connections and all the, you know, things you've introduced me throughout the past few years. Okay, so JETAA is great. Just want to get that point across. So my career path, I started doing a lot of community work in Little Tokyo during my time at UCLA. And I would consider myself like a community builder at the time. Then I went on JET, acquired the Japanese language within 2 years. And then I moved to Tokyo to be an agency recruiter at a small boutique firm called the Bridge Group, and that was a really good experience. But all things never last forever. So I actually lost my job during the pandemic within less than 24 hours, mind you. It's not typically, it happens in Japan, but it's quite illegal to do that. And so there were a lot of things that I had to just kind of get through, figure out what I was going to do. And I just decided to come back to the US for multiple reasons. But I found myself back in the States during a global pandemic, during a lot of unrest in the communities, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I was in quarantine for about 2 weeks, and I realized at the time that it would be really nice to have somebody like a career transition coach to like help me figure out what are my next steps. And so through that process of figuring out on my own for about 3 months of job searching, trying new projects, going back to video editing, web design, all these things I used to do in college that I didn't do in Japan, I realized that I could just quick start my long-term plan, which was to be a career consultant or some type of business consultant in the future. So that's kind of where the idea came to me that why not start now rather than 10 years later? And over the course of those months, a lot of people had mentioned, you know, being on JET, you know, you got a lot of global work experience. Plus, if you stayed after JET, you have an additional, you know, 2, 3, 4 years. And why don't you do something with that? And so I was like, okay, well, what do I do? So I just decided that with the networks that I've created over the years and being a recruiter, I really enjoyed the coaching aspect of things and listening to people's dreams, ambitions, and how to funnel that into like an action plan. I decided to go into B2C coaching. And so right now, that means that I'm working with individuals in programs and on an individual basis. The next step for me will be to go more B2B, and that'll be in Japan and the US, and that will come along with the accreditation that I need to get in the next year. And I hope after that to become like a speaker facilitator, I guess B2B, but also for MPOs. And essentially, I guess what I wanted to give 4 takeaways though that I've learned over the past 6 months in starting up my own business. One of them is that soft skills are highly underrated and undervalued, I think, as we come back to the States. People actually really need the services and soft skills that you have acquired through JET and other occupations. So don't underestimate your communication and soft skills, because I realize even like for business consulting or just consolidating people's thoughts, like people pay for that kind of stuff. And that was kind of new to me. So in the coaching world, that's really exciting. And that's part of what I do. Another thing too, don't associate your skills and services with your self-worth. It's kind of like a money mindset conversation, but I really think that if you do start your own business or you start to go on your own path, kind of thinking about pricing and all of those things, a lot of our work gets caught up in like who we are, because if it is really personal, it can feel like, I don't know, like the money is tied to how much you're worth. And so just trying to keep those two separate. It's like something that I've realized is really important. Number 3 is don't overthink, just go for it. I can't tell you how many times I've like thought about what program to do, what kind of coaching, I don't know, themed event I should run. And it just kills time. It's trial and error. So just go for something. If you want to try it, do it. If it doesn't work out, tweak it. And that's like how things get improved. So that one. And the last one is like your network is your friend. I could say, I guess I'm like a serial network builder. Like over the past like 4 months, I've spoken with over 100 new people. And I've been doing this for the past 8 years, where it's like I'm always in conversations with new people left and right. And I don't know, you grow your network and you're able to just expand kind of like your viewpoint and see where you are a lot better. So soft skills are great. Don't associate your skills and services with your self-worth. Don't overthink things, and your network is your friend. And that's what I want to leave you with today. And I think this year for me, a lot of my priorities have changed. I don't know about you, but for me, a new country, new home, new business, and end of like a 3-year relationship that started in Japan. So for anyone who attends today, I have this scheduling link on this QR code where you can set up like a 45-minute chat with me for a clarity call, which is good for anyone who's currently transitioning in your career or reevaluating your life skills. And I just wanted to let you know that that is there. And I'll also leave this link here in the box. But I think I went over time. Sorry, Bahia. Thank you so much.
Muted. I'm sorry, I'm muted. Right on schedule. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Maya, but we're going to talk more about networking. But Kristy just gave you a great opportunity to network with her. So definitely take her up on that if you are hoping to connect with people after this. So now I'd like to turn it over to another person who has recently launched their own business, Mya Fisher.
Thank you, Bahia, and U.S. JETAA for having me this evening. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. So I thought I would, I know when people talk about their journeys, they sort of do this sequential thing from beginning to end. But what I want to do is focus on 2020 as the year for me, because as many of you know, 2020 is not the year that we expected. And I actually in 2019 had done a retreat with a friend thinking about launching my own business. But at that time, my focus, my timeline, and how I would do it was all different. And those plans went out the window once February of this year hit. And between the coronavirus, which reshaped and sort of imploded the exchange and study abroad space where I worked, the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor this summer, and the protests for racial justice that followed, and people actually paying attention, combined with all of the lead up to the 2020 presidential election, there was so much happening this year that I felt like I was moved to action. But I spent a lot of time this year trying to think about what that action would look like and what I would do. And so I realized I couldn't stay quiet and just sort of watch things happen. And so I actually was laid off as a result of the coronavirus pandemic from my job. I pursued another job and didn't get that. And I was sort of in this place of trying to understand and make sense of why all of this stuff was happening. And as a woman of color in the U.S. Japan community, sort of in that space around the protests, there was so much that was happening. And I'd overheard some things in a professional context that made me realize that there were some things that had to be said in the community. So I started by starting a blog. I wrote about international education and race, and I started a series on social and racial justice in the U.S. Japan community. And so that was sort of my first foray into sort of trying to figure out what I was going to do. And a lot of people from the JET community shared the blog and followed the blog and actually asked me to come and talk to their different programs and different groups about some of the topics that I was writing about. And then I had a friend who reminded me that when I was a grad student, I actually taught a sociology class on how race and ethnicity shape American life. And she's like, well, why don't you just do that in a virtual space? So I was like, okay, yes, I can do that. So I launched a virtual class. I did a pilot version that was very narrowed down to just a few weeks from this semester-long course that I used to teach. And thankfully, I posted it on LinkedIn, and Bahia agreed to help promote it through U.S. JETAA networks. And people who didn't even know me but knew I was a JET, they shared it. And lo and behold, there were a number of JET alums who actually signed up for the course and took my course. And some of you I know are here today, so thank you for that. And so it was in the midst of all of these things that my new business was born. I started a company called Global Equity Forward, and we are a firm that is focused on equipping organizations and companies to develop and deploy equity and inclusion plans, right? Everybody, after all of the stuff from the summer, everybody wants to do something, but people don't know how. So that's what my company is designed to do. In addition to sort of equipping people to handle the things that are happening today, we also equip them to handle things that are inevitably going to come in the future. And we're also into encouraging and empowering them to be committed to the change that they are wanting to make. And in addition to that advising piece, I also offer workshops and courses to the general public, like my class, which I am actually relaunching in January. I think I'll be announcing it at the end of this week. And so I hope there are many more JETs that will join this time as well. And I will say that my business, one thing that has really been gratifying is that this is the first time that I feel like all of these sort of disparate parts of my journey, the jobs that I've done in the past, are all coming together to actually be useful in what I'm doing right now. And so to the point of the session today, which is about make your own luck. Well, first of all, I don't believe in luck. But what I do believe in is forging a career path that is stamped with your personal signature. So my career path really hasn't made a lot of sense to other people. Sometimes it hasn't made a lot of sense to me. But when I look back on the choices that I've made, I've always said yes to opportunities, to things that I'm passionate about. I have done things that are of interest to me, that I want to learn more about. And these choices have also always resulted in unexpected bonuses, whether it's a new opportunity, a new job, a new skill, or a new friendship. And so in thinking about what you want to do with your own career, think about what you're passionate about. And when I look back, there's a logic to all of the things. And like I said, the work that I'm doing right now all seems to be sort of coming together in a very interesting way that makes me giggle and realize that, linear is not the way that things happen. The sort of popcorn style of career flow actually is more common than we are led to believe. And so that would be one thing. So don't make your own luck, but really chart your own course and stamp it with your own personality and your own choices, and be proud of that. Even if other people don't understand it, I promise you there's somebody that will understand it and value that. And those are the people that you want to connect with and work with. The second piece I will want to talk about is the JET alumni network and the U.S. Japan community. And I don't know about you, but I've never been comfortable with the word network as a noun, as a verb. It just feels really weird. And I think part of that is because the ways that I've seen it acted or enacted have always sort of left me uncomfortable. So what I will say is I focus on my relationships with people. And the relationships that I have forged with members of the U.S. JETAA community or the JETAA community writ large, and even the JETAA DC community, which is where I am located, have been really invaluable in launching my own business. So for example, I see at the core of my relationships with people as connecting with people as human beings, right? There's nothing transactional. Even before the pandemic, I would call people on the phone and have conversations just to check in and see how people are doing. And over time, what you realize is that as you invest in people, they will return and invest in you. So when I started telling people that I was going to launch my own business, people really reached out and they were like, how can I help? And so actually one of the JETAA DC members, Danielle Reed, who I know is on the call, she reached out and she's like, you know, I launched my own business. We had talked before about her work. And she was like, hey, if you need help with filing the paperwork, and here is a place where you can look for somebody to help you design a logo. And here's a really good platform for financial management. That was really, really, really helpful. And even the JETAA officers of the chapters around the US have actually approached me to help them design workshops and trainings to do their work more equitably and inclusively throughout the US, and sort of looking forward to see how they can do better. And so without that support and people who, again, were invested in my success, I wouldn't have been able to launch in a position of real authority, as well as just sort of comfort, if you will. I know it's hard to launch a business. I'm not saying it's easy, but the support and encouragement of the JETAA community has really, really been critical to the launch of my success, of my company. And I will say that I've come to appreciate and deeply value the people who surround me, both as colleagues, as friends. And I will say that we are not yet part of what I call the gray-haired senior leader sect, but I have seen that we have power, we have expertise, we have influence, and we're people who get things done. And so that I will leave you with sort of characterizing the JETAA community. And I'm really grateful for that. And so I will stop there because I could keep going, but I'm not going to. And I will turn it back over to Bahia, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. Today is not a good tech day for me. I've done a million of these webinars, but everything's going wrong for me today. Thank you so much, Maya. That was really great. I really liked what you said about jobs not being linear. I have never heard the term popcorn style, but I like that. I think it's really certainly reflects my own personal experience. And Maya's class that she's going to be teaching on race and ethnicity and how they shape America, as soon as we have all the details for that, we'll certainly be sharing that out with the network. I could not take it this last time, but I am really hoping I have the chance to. And I also just want to plug, we're working on something with Maya, hopefully for January. So as soon as we can announce that, I hope we'll be able to share it. All right, now before we move on to Steven, the JETwit godfather, or father, I guess, and father of children, actual children as well, I do want to say, if you would like to network and connect with others on this webinar, feel free to leave your LinkedIn in the chat while we're talking to get connected. Now, I would like to turn it over to Steven, founder of JETwit and all over Idea Man. So Steven, go ahead.
Let's see. Hi, everybody. Yeah, you said getting towards the gray-haired sect. Some of us are getting there a little faster than others. But anyway, thank you everybody for coming out. And I am really enjoying this. I love JET alum events because I love to hear you guys talk about all this stuff. It's always so interesting to me. And I'll start off first plugging why you should put JET on your resume, so I don't forget that point, and on your LinkedIn profile, because JETs are everywhere. And when you see a JET, there's an instant, the guard goes down. People, people feel a connection, and it's not, just because you went to the same college kind of connection. It's there's a shared experience. There's things that that are positive things about people when they've been on the JET program. So put it on your resume. Don't just say I taught in Japan, put JET on your resume. Put it on your LinkedIn profile, because when I'm bored sometimes I just go onto LinkedIn and I look and see if anybody has JET, and I just start connecting with tons of people, because one of my personal goals is to connect with the entire JET community, JET alum community on LinkedIn. So if you connect with me, it'll help you connect with other people too. And that can be really helpful for making your own luck, because if you're, and I've done this before, when I was trying to get a job teaching in the City University of New York system, I searched on LinkedIn and I found a JET connection to somebody who was in there, and I reached out to that JET person and they put me in touch and got a resume there, and that helped me move forward. So put JET on all your things. Okay, so let's see. So many things. I'm gonna keep this short. I'm gonna keep it short. Okay. To Kristy's point about how it'd be nice to have someone to help you figure things out, that was my original motivation. It was 1992, and I was done with JET, and and I went to law school, but I didn't really know, what do people do after JET? And I was looking for somebody to help me, to tell me, and I realized eventually that there wasn't anybody, and so I started building that in a sense myself as a way to get those answers. So I guess that's one form of trying to make my own luck. There's a few principles I think that I've learned over the years that help to make one's own luck. One is that the only constant is change. So it's very difficult to rely on institutions anymore, on whether it's an employer or anything like that. And in its place, I think alumni networks and alumni communities are things that can be that constant. And I think that's one of the reasons that the JET alumni community and network is so valuable and is going to be increasingly valuable. Another kind of underlying notion is that the biggest risk is not taking one, because the ground is going to keep shifting and things are going to keep changing anyway. So more and more, you have to be willing to try things and not be afraid to try things and not let that hold you back, because that fear is very real. And then it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission a lot of the time. And I think getting involved with the JET Alumni Association is a great way to make your own luck, so to speak. You can try things out, you can take risks, there's nobody to ask for permission a lot of the time. That's what I learned. I started asking people, and then I realized there's nobody in charge. So I just started doing the things that I thought would be helpful for other people and that I would want if I was a JET. And I've seen over the years, as other people after me have gotten involved in JETAA chapters, I've seen them grow into leaders. And I remember that process myself, that at my work, I always wanted to ask my boss, can I do this? Should I do this? And then with JET alumni projects that I took on, I would just do things. I would just make the decision. And then I started building confidence in my ability to do that and realized that, yeah, okay, got to move forward on that. But JETAA chapters and working on JETAA things is a great laboratory to kind of experiment and try things outside of your work situation. And because the consequences are so minimal, you really can't screw things up too bad. Like there's nothing too horrible that's going to happen. Everybody will just forget about it and move on, and you do the next event or you do the next idea you have. And a lot of the idea of making your own luck is, I think, for me, I think I got tired of the process of waiting for employers, waiting for people to make decisions about whether I could go forward or not. I didn't want to have that drama and that risk. I always wanted to reduce that. So, that meant creating ways to create opportunities for myself, and using the JETwit as a blog and learning that, and learning how to use WordPress turned out to be a huge thing for me. I've used it in other jobs I've had, the same sort of process, because when you can communicate what it is you're doing, then other people can see what you're doing and they can help you. Or when you go to talk with them, they already know what you're doing and you don't have to explain it all. So things like that can help you make your own luck, and just having something that communicates that for you. You can also make your own luck, and I've done this with JET alums. I've gotten them to write for JETwit. Somebody was looking for a job in publishing that just moved to New York. And I said, why don't you just write a few posts about your job search? And at the beginning of each one, just mention that, you're looking, and here's your LinkedIn profile. If anybody knows of anything, let me know, just put it out there. And she wrote a few posts, and another JET alum got in touch with her. So in creating the JETwit site to make my own luck, it's also intended as a tool to help the rest of the JET alum community make its own luck. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Let's see, I think that's the main things I wanted to say. Yeah, that was it. Okay, so I'm not going to keep going on anymore about this right now. I will turn it back over to Bahia, and and we can get to question asking. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please, by all means, connect with me. I always connect with a JET alum, no matter who they are, on Facebook or on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Steven. And yes, exactly what you're saying. Always connect with a JET alum. I think that's exactly why you should put JETs on your resume, because people will connect with you. So we have a lot of really great questions that have already come in, but if you have additional questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will try to get to them. I really wanted to just mention something that Steven said, which is how working with a JETAA chapter is kind of a leadership laboratory. I absolutely agree with that. For me professionally, getting involved with the Florida JET Alumni Association and becoming president was a direct line to me doing what I'm doing today for work. And so I absolutely would not be here in front of you without that JETAA chapter leader experience. And all of the JETAA chapters are looking for people who want to lead and want to get involved. So if that's something you are interested in, go find your chapter and send them an email and say, I want to get involved. They will certainly have you. All right, so we have a lot of good questions. Sorry, that was my timer. Steven, you went shorter than I thought. First question that I want to ask is, how did you use the JET Alumni Network to aid you in your transition out of JET? Some of it I think has been covered a little bit, but if there's anything additional you want to add, please share, and I'll just let any of the speakers who want to contribute just jump in.
Okay, I'll go. My current career right now, I'm the director of online legal English programs at Georgetown Law School. And before that, I was the director of legal English programs at St. John's Law School. But before that, I was working in sort of the bankruptcy law world, and then was in nonprofits, and I didn't want to be doing that. And I finally decided that I wanted to go back to teaching ESL, which is the one job that I'd really enjoyed. And at the time that I was working at a nonprofit, I took a walk on 32nd Street through Koreatown, and I ran into another JET alum, Maria Pariser, who was teaching ESL. And at the time, I was planning to do a panel, JETAA New York panel on freelancing, because I was kind of freelancing at the time. And so I grabbed some people I knew who were translators and interpreters and people who were writers. And then Maria was perfect because she was doing ESL. She wasn't either of those two other categories. So when I actually did the panel and I was moderating it, I was sitting there thinking, as Maria talked, I want to do ESL. So I started looking into it. So I talked to Maria. Maria put me in touch with people. And then I got the connections in the CUNY system through a JET alum that I didn't even know, who I found on LinkedIn. So all of those things led to my current career. And that was all the JETAA, you know, some of it was making an opportunity combined with running into somebody, combined with doing a LinkedIn search, all through the JETAA alum community that helped me with my transition.
Great. Thank you so much, Steven. LinkedIn's a really powerful tool. Does anyone else want to weigh in? Kristy or Mya?
I'll just say that, so I did JET from 2000 to 2002, so a really, really long time ago. And so for me, when I came back from JET, I wanted to stay connected to Japan, and I came back to the DC area, which is where I'm originally from. So I connected to JETAA DC, but nobody in the area at that time. I was looking for jobs in international education, specifically around Japan, but most of the jobs in DC were around policy and government. So I ended up working at the embassy for a couple of years, but stayed connected with the JETAA DC chapter, and continued to sort of build my network and keep in touch with people. JETAA DC for me was really good transitioning to remain connected to Japan, to find people that I could geek out about and just sort of share those interests with. But I was also somebody who bounced around every 2 years. So then I left DC and moved to New York. And so I got connected to JETAA New York. And then I moved to Wisconsin. And so I was connected to JETAA Chicago. And so for me, I think it has been personally fulfilling, especially in the early years when I came back, to help me stay connected to Japan, but then also to help me keep my ear to the ground about opportunities. And I actually got a lot of opportunities for side gigs related to Japan while I was a grad student. So I got a couple leads from JETwit, even without having met Steven. But in that way, it was really helpful. And as I talked about earlier, in the more recent years, sort of having maintained some of those connections over the years was really, really beneficial.
Thank you, Mya. All right, so our next question, I think, is for Kristy. How would you begin the job search process if you want to stay in Japan after JET, especially if you have a lower Japanese level like N4?
Sure. For me, I think most people on this call recognize that if you stayed after JET, a large majority of people went into recruitment. I didn't choose that industry because of that. It just kind of turned out that I liked to talk to a lot of people. Networking, making connections was just something that came naturally. So in recruitment, that's really important. But what I did, actually, I was searching for my job in Tokyo probably from like December of my last year on JET, and a few things popped up, and I actually wanted to initially go to a school in Tokyo. There was another school, but they also had JETs, and they were like, we can't take you from another JET program early, because they wanted me to come at the start of the school year. So I would just say it is difficult to line it up so that you get a job right after you finish JET, because if you're going into anything educational, their school year starts right like in April, not usually in the summer. So that put me in a little bit of a bind, but I ended up staying in Gunma to finish out my contract. And sometime along in February, March, I was fortunate enough to be close enough to Tokyo where I could like go in for an interview. It was about like a 2-hour train ride, but I made it in to interview at a smaller boutique firm. And the way I found that was actually just searching on LinkedIn and looking up who did JET and who's working in Tokyo. And so I did a lot of searches like that. I pinged a lot of people. I refused to apply somewhere where I didn't know somebody working there already or hadn't talked to them, just because I don't know, I just really didn't feel comfortable going somewhere where it's complete strangers. So that's kind of how that worked out. And I just LinkedIn and JETwit, and anything online was really like, we're in a really fortunate time. Like I did JET in 2016 to 2018. So the internet is like the best way to, I think, get connected and find those opportunities. But back to you, Bye. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We had one question come in advance that I don't want to talk about too much because we did a program recently that addressed this exact question. So I just want to mention it briefly. Someone asked if there are recommendations for introverted folks who feel like they're not good at networking and promoting themselves or their brands or their products. And we did a webinar with the Transitions career event that with Pacific Northwest, and Rob, you spoke on LinkedIn know-hows, but there's a great section in that webinar specifically on networking for introverts and everybody else who feels awkward. So I definitely recommend checking it out. But I do want to ask if the panelists have anything briefly to say about that particular topic. And a follow-up question, which is related, how do you network with past Jets? And I think Steven probably has a lot to say.
So on networking with past Jets, here's maybe this will kill two birds with one stone. I guess it depends on your personality and your interests. But if you want to get into a field that you're not in, so you want to get into international education, but you've never worked in that field or something, you can talk to other JET alums who are in that field, and I and others can help put you in touch with whatever field it is. And then as you talk to them, you can write a short post, put it on JETwit, put it on your own blog, wherever, and build up a little bit of a track record of that. And as you're doing that, you've got an excuse to talk to somebody that doesn't feel the same kind of social pressure because you're doing it to write a piece. And at the same time, you create a little bit of a trail, demonstrating an interest in it, and suddenly you can kind of bootstrap yourself into being in that field. So that can be a way, or you could do things like that without actually talking to people as well. So, that's one thought that comes to mind. But I'll pass the baton or pass the mic now.
Well, I would definitely like to hear from Kristy, who said, you said you've met with like 100 people or something recently. Can you tell us how you did that and give us any tips?
Yeah, so for me, the internet is the only way I can connect with people in Tokyo. It's been really bizarre. Like I thought when I came to the US, I would have like a huge disconnect with people in Japan. I would say 80% of the people I talk to on the daily are actually living in Japan. And the way that I was able to reach out to some of these folks was partly by way of what I'm doing. So as a career coach, I wanted to be sitting at career coaching tables at career events in Tokyo. So one of the recent ones where I met like 14 new people was just me reaching out to the CEO who was organizing this event it's called hireplanner.com. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's an HR CRM that's designed for the candidates to have a really good experience applying to companies. And I just reached out to him. He wasn't a Jet or anything, but I tend to write very intentional messages when it comes to like those little notes that you can put in LinkedIn. I've never just blanketly just clicked connect with somebody. I don't think some people don't even accept those anyway if they don't know why you're reaching out to them. So always have an ask, introduce like the connection. If you went to an event, if you know somebody, put something in there that makes them realize that you're not just trying to like up your people count on LinkedIn. I don't know, some people do that and I'm not a huge fan of that. So I think that's one thing, just knowing how to reach out on the LinkedIn, but also when you're in like Zoom events, maybe not, I don't know about this one, but when you have the ability to message people individually, it's actually a really good position to be in. So when I go to webinars across the globe, like it doesn't matter if it's LA or Japan or whatever, I always I message people who were speaking or asking questions that I like connected to. And I was like, hey, I really liked what you said. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And if I can't catch them before the thing's over, I'll just message them on LinkedIn and say, hey, about that question you answered. So just make it really personal, because that's like the only way I can really meet people who I don't know, since I'm staying home all day. Well, for the most part, yeah. Thanks, though.
Yeah, COVID has really changed and shaped, I think, our ways of interacting. But I really want to just second what Kristy said. If you're connecting with someone on LinkedIn, put a note in when you connect with them, even if it's just like, hey, I was also a Jet and I'm thinking of going into the same career field as you are, and I just love to hear your story. Like even something like that, that's personal. Or if it's, someone you've met from like a webinar like this or something, just at least put in the chat, hey, I saw you speak on whatever webinar. I personally get a lot of LinkedIn requests. And I have some people who I'm like, I don't know if I should accept this. I don't know who this person is. I don't know what the context is of them sending me a request. And so I think LinkedIn messages are really powerful. You don't have a lot of space, but you don't need a lot of space. All right, I'd like to move on. There was a follow-up question about networking with past Jets and specifically about whether there were Jets in the animation industry. And I just want to also throw out that there are Jets in every industry. Every single industry that you can think of, there are Jets there. The trick is finding them. And one of the best ways to find Jets who are in a specific industry, besides like LinkedIn searching and hoping that they have Jet in their profile as well as whatever they're doing, is to, well, I'll let Steven talk about how you can utilize JETwit, but I think it's through other Jets. The best way to find Jets who are doing something specific. Steven, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you could either create a group, JET alums in animation, I don't think that one exists yet, and set up a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group or whatever, and then you're the creator of it, and then we'll, through JETAA chapter channels and JETwit and stuff like that, we'll get it out there and it'll flush people out of the woodwork. That's one way to do it. Search for people on LinkedIn, do a search JET and JET and animation or other topics and see who comes up. And if I happen to be connected to the person, you can always reach out to me, and I will, if you're like too many whatever levels away from them, I'm happy to help if I can. But yeah, they're out there, and that's, I mean, a lot of what I've done over the years is how do you find all these people, and then how do you kind of keep them in an orbit so you can find them if you need to. And LinkedIn tends to be the best way, but there's a lot of other ways, and just, getting things out there and letting people know that you're looking is the best way to do it, because then we can help spread the word and people will step up.
I'd also like to give a shout out to a great Facebook group that was created during the pandemic, created by Daniel Lowe, a JET alum in Boston, but Jets who get things done. And this group exploded into more than 600 people, and people are still posting regularly. And I've gotten to know people through that group who are doing like really, really interesting things. I'll try to source the link for you when I have a moment, but definitely check that out and join that group. It's been a lot of fun. I'd like to move on to the next question. All right, tips for going back to school post-JET. I have a few comments on that, but I think Maya, you did your graduate degree after JET, right? Do you have anything to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, sure. So I did 2 years of working before I went to grad school. When I came back from JET, and I will just say that I didn't really have any plans for college after college, other than knowing that I wanted to apply to the JET program. Like that was my plan. And while I was in Japan as a JET, I really enjoyed teaching. And I loved the cross-cultural exchange elements of teaching that I learned in JET. And when I came back, I started doing a lot of volunteering and discovered the field of international education as a profession. And at the time, again, this was in 2002, there were very few programs in the US that existed. The principal one was the one that's in Vermont, SIT, the School for International Training. And at that time, you had to be in Vermont. They didn't have the low residency requirement. So those of you who went through it when you didn't have to be in Vermont, you are luckier than I was at the time. So I'll just put that in there. And I know there was recently a webinar for JET alumni who were considering the field, and there was a scholarship available. So I think Bahia can direct you to that one too. And it was a relatively new field, and it was a time when the field was sort of in this credentialing surge where a lot of people were entering and everybody was saying that you needed a master's degree. And so I pursued a master's degree. And then as I was doing that, my advisor was like, well, what kind of jobs do you want when you're done? And At the time, there was a lot of conversation around study abroad and underrepresentation in study abroad. And I realized that if I really wanted to do leadership in that area and really make sort of impactful differences by leading an office or at an institution or a program, that I needed a PhD, because that's what the people that had those jobs had. So I decided to go for a PhD. And at the time, there was this question of, do I get a sort of traditional PhD or a degree in international education? And at the time, there was not a lot that you could do academically with a PhD in international education, because there weren't that many institutions for teaching. And that's what a PhD teaches you to do, is teach or go to into academia. And so I decided to get a traditional one that could equip me and be sort of transferable if I wanted to go into teaching, which I didn't want to do. And at the time, I had nobody in my family who sort of had gone through that level of grad school. So the PhD and understanding what a PhD was about and why people went, totally not what I expected. But again, as I said, a lot of the things that I learned in that program have really served me, particularly in this moment in time, and also in the business that I'm doing. So I think if you want to go, you should really know why you're there. Grad school is not a place to really discover what you want to be doing. It's too expensive an option to do that unless you are personally wealthy or your parents are paying. It's just not a place to do that. And because other people who are there who are taking it seriously need to be, everybody sort of needs to be in agreement as to why they're there and what they're trying to learn and accomplish. So I can talk more about grad school, but I will leave it there.
Thank you so much, Maya. I have actually a similar story. After JET, I came back and I worked in the corporate sector for a few years before going and getting my master's in international education. And I'm actually currently, I've finished all my PhD coursework and I'm working on my dissertation also for a PhD in international education. But I think there are a lot of transferable skills from that experience, and going that route has served me quite well in the job I'm doing now. But it really depends on what you want to do. I definitely don't recommend getting a PhD just because like you want to be called doctor, because it's a lot of work. But at the same time, I also think going and working after JET for a few years really puts things into perspective about what you want to be doing. And for me, it really highlighted how much I had loved thinking about cultural differences between the US and Japan, and how much I loved, you know, teaching, and teaching was not the route I chose to go. That actually takes me to one of the other questions, and I think we are going to run probably about 10 minutes late because there's so many great questions and so much great content. So just be forewarned, we'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. Before I go on to the other question, though, I did want to mention that we now have 6 different scholarships at 6 different schools for JET alumni. I put a link in the chat, and we've recently finalized one at American University for their School of Education. And that relates to and a SIT, which Maya mentioned, and MIS that Kristy mentioned. So these are really, really great opportunities, and most of them are offering a 30% tuition waiver just for being a JET alum. So it's really, really fantastic. We hope to add more soon. I can't take credit for it. I'm working with a whole working group on this effort. But in terms of going back to school, we did have somebody ask specifically about if they have a high level of Japanese, but no Japanese teaching experience, how do they get into teaching Japanese? And I want to again direct you to another webinar we did, one of our very first on teaching Japanese after JET, which I'll pull and put in the chat. But basically, you might need to get a teaching degree if you don't have one already. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that. All right, I think the final question, well, we have 2 questions. I'm going to take we'll take the one in the Q&A last. But my next question for the entrepreneurs is if you have any thoughts on self-employment, on entrepreneurship, and specifically, like, how do you overcome the fear or uncertainty of, you know, going out on your own and starting your own business?
Well, I'll go first if that's okay, Kristy. So one thing I think that 2020 did for me was to allow me to shed all of the things that I thought about the world and what I would be doing and what was possible. I think, as I said, the coronavirus sort of exploded the arena of international education and exchange. And it also exploded sort of, how we do that in the US Japan space. And back in April, I did some interviews with leaders of US Japan organizations, trying to ask them, like, what do you think is going to happen? How is this going to impact the relationship? What can we do to, to actually be proactive and potentially reshape the relationship moving forward? And what I heard was that people were waiting for things to happen. And that energized me to think about, okay, if all of those people are waiting, then perhaps I can get ahead of it and actually start leading. And so for me, I think the circumstances sort of released any inhibitions I had about risk. And to Steve's point about people telling me what I could and couldn't do, like asking people permission to lead. And also, it has changed the landscape of work. And so there are a lot of areas and arenas of opportunity that weren't sort of people were thinking about before. One of the things that I think is going to be really important is these virtual spaces. How many, we are all tired of Zoom. Zoom can only do so much. I was like, early in the summer, I was like, where are the people who can design alternatives to Zoom? More engaged ways that we can connect on Zoom. And I'm working with an organization right now that has designed one of those such platforms, and I'm using that for my class this spring. So I think there are things that we can do that maybe pre-2020 we were more risk averse to doing. And I think people are more willing to engage with those risks. So people who might not have thought about, equity and inclusion things are now actually looking for people to help them with those projects. Priorities are different. And so to people who might be concerned about taking risks, I actually think right now is the best time to take risks because there are so many potential options and arenas that you can really possibly tackle or be a part of.
Kristy, will you share your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I just want to share kind of why I actually chose to just do this on my own rather than, I don't know, go apply to be another recruiter or to go work HR somewhere else. My situation when I got laid off in Japan was due to the fact that we didn't have like a cloud system. It was very archaic. Like the stuff that we were on, I was using FileMaker Pro, which some of you probably don't even know what that is, but I was told that was an ancient thing and I was using that as my database. And essentially because we couldn't do anything remote, I told my boss, like, hey, I'm gonna work from home because this person just came back to Japan sick in March when we weren't supposed to be traveling, and he let them come back to the office. And I felt like, okay, I'm the only one who can take care of my health and my partner who I was living with at the time. So I told him, like, I'm gonna work from home because we're recruiters. We just we use things like just the internet and LinkedIn. And they didn't pay me when I went home to go work from home, despite it being a pandemic. And so for me, having the autonomy to choose, to be able to work from home is huge. So now I'm a digital nomad. I can work from anywhere in the world. I also want to be working in both Japan and the US. So having my own company and running my own programs, I'm planning to do like 2/3 of the year in the States and then 2 to 3 months in Japan. There's like a tax thing where you have to be careful how many days you spend in which country, but this gives me that freedom. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I even chose to do this, was because of that experience. And I don't wish that upon anyone. It was really, really just, I don't know, it had a big impact on me. But also when I think the question mentioned something about like limiting beliefs and things like that, I can definitely tell you, I'm 26, turning 27. Age has become this really big monster question that has popped up for me. But I just want to say that age is just a number, and this goes for both sides. Like experience in the years is much more important than the years of experience. And I want people to, I think, just that's something that comes with, for me, it was being in Japan. I was told a lot of things about my age and just being in that waters. So when I came back to the US and I realized all these people in their 20s were starting their own companies and they were doing very well on their own, I realized like your environment has a really big impact on how you think about things, or at least the people around you. So whether it's in Japan or the States, make sure you surround yourself with people who believe in you and also who you kind of aspire to be like, because that's going to have a huge impact on what you think you can or can't do. And the last thing too, if you're going to start your own business, the one thing that I've always been told and just noticed a lot is make sure you ask yourself, like, what problem are you solving? Because if you're not solving a problem, I mean, I'm sure you can make some like fancy stickers, or I don't know, do like some clothing line, but it has to be solving a problem. And so that's one thing that I've been keeping in mind as I'm building out my programs, like what problem am I solving? What gap am I closing? So that's what I want to leave with you. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Kristy. And on a related note, talking about remote work trends in Japan, there's an event tomorrow on remote work trends in Japan that's being hosted by a JET alumni, Daniel Lowe. I put the link in the chat in case anyone is interested in that. We also had a question about moving into the nonprofit sector after not being in that sector. And I just want to briefly say that there's a lot of transferable skills between corporate, education, teaching sectors if you want to go into nonprofit industry. And since I did that, I would be happy to talk to you, whoever asked that question. So please connect with me after this webinar and maybe set up a virtual coffee or an information session. All right, so now we are out of time. So I want to just briefly wrap up, and we'll ask the final question, which is, I think, a doozy. So let's try not to talk too long about it. But 2020 has been a hell of a year for all of us. What do you do when you've had bad luck or are feeling unlucky? We'll start with Steven and then go to Mya and then Kristy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a tough question. And for all the things we're talking about and all the great things we're hearing about JET's doing and great groups like JETs who get things done. I mean, I also want to acknowledge for a lot of JET alums, things are hard. Depression is real, anxiety is real. And I know a lot of people and a lot of JET alums are dealing with that. And, and I've dealt with that. And you feel very stuck and you're not quite sure where things are going. One of the things, fortunately, about the JET alum community is that there's a lot of us out there, and people can help, and people do help, and people want to help. So, if that's what's going on, don't be afraid to ask for help from the JET alum community.
Yeah, I agree. And as I said, I don't believe in luck. I am a person of faith, and I believe that everything happens for a reason. And but that doesn't mean it's not hard, right? I lost a job. I, was like, oh my gosh, am I going to pay my bills? I don't want to have to move back in with my parents. And unlike Kristy, I'm a little bit older. And so, there are a lot of expectations about what you should be doing and where you should be at a certain age or point in your career. And that can be a lot of pressure. But I think Kristy mentioned this earlier. I think it really is important to surround yourself with people who are invested in you, not just you professionally, but you as a human being. People who are invested in your growth if you have if you are dealing with anxiety or depression or things like that, people who can support you in that, whether it's with a phone call or just, you know, a virtual hug. And I think the JET community is one where you can be vulnerable, which it's hard for me. I don't like asking for help. It's something that I've had to learn as an entrepreneur. That is like one of the big things that you have to learn how to do. But if you ask for help, you may not get 50 people who want to help you, but you might find that 1 or 2 people who are like, hey, what can I do? How can I help? How can I support? How can I encourage? You know, can I connect you with somebody? And that, I think, is more important. It's not about the numbers, but it's about quality of people. And there are a lot of quality people in this community. And yeah, life, you know, like 2020 was a horrible year for a lot of people. A lot of things sucked, but it's not without hope for me. And in a couple of weeks, it'll be 2021. So we can turn the page and move forward and think about how we can do better, and 2021 can be a better year for us.
Thanks, Maya. I was just nodding the whole time to everything you just said. I have the one thing I just want to share with you all is the thing that I regretted not doing when I got laid off. I felt really ashamed and I didn't feel comfortable announcing to the world, like some other people on LinkedIn, you know, when you get laid off and in droves, like maybe 400, 600 people, maybe it feels a little bit more comfortable because you know your colleagues are also out there reaching out to their colleagues in the tech world especially. But for me, I was very uncomfortable doing that. I didn't know what that would look like. I worried so much about what other people thought. And it turns out when I reconnected with folks after moving back to the States, I reached out and told them, hey, this is what happened. Sorry, I didn't let you know. And they're like, oh, really? We were looking for somebody like you for this job at the time. And I was like, well, my visa's already done. I already cut that off because I wanted my pension money. And then I left. And I just really regretted that. But it stems from, you know, like a lot of personal shame, ego stuff. And so I just want to encourage everyone to, if you feel comfortable, I would encourage you to put out something like asking for help. Asking for help is really important and difficult to do, especially maybe also because a lot of other people are asking for help. And so you feel like, oh, I can't ask for help, but you'd be surprised how many folks are willing to lend a hand. And I really just want to end with that because you never know who's out there and who's available to help you get through the difficult times that we are in. So
thank you so much. And this has come up in the chat a bunch, especially the JET community. JETs want to help each other. So you already have this really meaningful connection with people you don't even know. So use that. And I just also want to second, don't compare yourself to other people. Everybody's pace, especially if you're a popcorn style of person in your career, it's not going to be a linear path like you do this and this and this. And that's normal. The linear path is more unusual these days. So don't compare yourself to somebody else. Just figure out what you want to do and follow that. So I'd like to say thank you so much to all of our speakers for a really wonderful program. It was just so great hearing from all of you. I feel like I had learned so much. Thank you so much. Everyone who was here today, please feel free to connect with all of us on LinkedIn and get connected. And then I'd just like to briefly summarize. I hope that my screen is showing properly, but this is our very, very last webinar of the year, and that's pretty exciting. I mean, like Maya said, it's almost 2021. I don't know about y'all, but I am so ready for it. But this has actually been a really great year for U.S. JETAA. We've done a lot. We've awarded 22 microgrants for current JETs. So for those of you who are current and prospective JETs, please check out our microgrant program so that you can receive funding to do projects in your schools and communities. We had our second year of career support programming. We were able to provide 35 JET alumni with free career counseling one-on-ones. And we were able to give 54 JET alumni a free resume workshop and course. This is our 9th professional development webinar of the year. That's fantastic. And we worked with Pacific Northwest JETAA to host the very first virtual transitions 7-day career event. And we also supported the JET Alumni Network by co-hosting the first ever virtual national conference for the JETAA chapter leaders. I know we've already kind of plugged getting involved with your JETAA chapter network, but I cannot express enough how awesome the national conference is. I think I've been to 5 or 6 of them, and you get an opportunity to go and meet with other JETAA chapter leaders and, you know, get some leadership training and support one another and connect one another. It's really fantastic. So hopefully we'll be doing that in person in 2021. And then I also wanted to just briefly mention that we launched our first ever Taiyusei program, which in partnership with JETAA Southeast, which is a program to increase diversity and representation among Black and Latinx students in the South. And that was a really, really cool program to start. I also, I guess lastly, want to just mention that we have a new forum, the Jetson Japan Forum, and we are seeking contributors who want to write articles for U.S. JETAA about different interesting things in your fields, and we will put that in your chat, in the chat. And then last of all, we do appreciate your support either as a member or a donor, and so please consider donating to help us keep programs like this free. All right, well, thank you all, everybody. I hope you have a really fantastic rest of your night, and we will see you in 2020.